Owen Grant pressed his palm against the cool window of his dormitory, watching 3 suns set over the alien horizon. Purple clouds drifted past towers that spiraled higher than any building on Earth. Somewhere in those towers, thousands of students from hundreds of worlds were settling in for the night. Most of them probably were not wondering if they had made a terrible mistake by coming here. The Galactic Concordance Academy accepted its first human students 3 cycles ago. Owen was part of the second group, one of only 12 humans among 3,000 beings who looked nothing like him. His acceptance letter had arrived with a warning that humans came from what the galaxy classified as a dangerous world. He had laughed at the time. Earth seemed perfectly normal to him. "You are doing the thing again." Dylan spoke from across the room without looking up from his datapad. Owen's roommate resembled what might happen if a deer learned to walk upright and grew an extra set of fingers. His fur shifted from brown to gray depending on his mood, and right now it was decidedly gray. "What thing?" Owen turned away from the window. "The staring into space thing. The thinking too hard thing." Dylan's large ears twitched. "You do it before every xenobiology class." Owen could not argue with that. Professor Milt's classes always left him feeling like a specimen under glass. The elderly arachnoid scholar had 8 eyes and seemed to use all of them to watch Owen whenever discussion turned to predator species or dangerous worlds. "I just don't understand why everyone acts so weird around me," Owen said, pulling on his academy jacket. The gray fabric adjusted automatically to fit his frame, one of the few pieces of technology here that actually impressed him. Dylan finally looked up. His eyes were too large, too dark, and held an expression Owen had learned to read as concern. "Owen, you have forward-facing eyes." "So?" "Predators have forward-facing eyes. Prey animals have eyes on the sides of their heads to watch for danger." Dylan gestured to his own face where his eyes sat far apart. "Every species learns this in basic biology." Owen sat on his bed, which had been specially made to accommodate human sleeping preferences. Everything in the academy required accommodation for him. The doors were too tall. The chairs were wrong shapes. The food synthesizers had needed 3 weeks of programming before they could make something his stomach would not reject. "I'm not a predator," Owen said. "Humans are omnivores. Your teeth say otherwise." Dylan returned to his datapad. "You should get to class. Professor Milt gets irritable when students arrive late, and he is already interested in you enough." The corridors of the academy were carved from some kind of living stone that glowed with soft blue light. Students moved in clusters, speaking languages Owen's translator implant struggled to process. A group of crystalline litherans passed by, their bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. They gave Owen a wide berth. He found Priya waiting outside the xenobiology lab. She was a litheran herself, her crystalline body flickering between clear and rose-colored as she noticed him approach. "Owen." Perfect timing. Her voice came from somewhere inside her body, translated into words he could understand. "Did you study for the practical examination?" "There's a practical exam?" Owen felt his stomach drop. Professor Milt announced it last session. "Were you not paying attention?" Priya's colors shifted to concerned amber. "He said it would be memorable." The lab doors opened and students filed inside. Owen had grown used to the way others positioned themselves in the room. Herbivorous species clustered together near the front. Omnivorous species took the middle rows, and Owen sat alone at a table in the back corner, where Bastian the Grandorian sometimes joined him. Bastian resembled a walking boulder, and was one of the few students who did not seem nervous around humans. Professor Milt entered through a side door, his 8 legs carrying his bulbous body with surprising grace. He wore a translation collar around what might have been his neck, and it rendered his clicking speech into perfect galactic common. "Good cycle, students. Today we begin our unit on fear responses across species lines." Professor Milt's 8 eyes scanned the room, pausing on Owen for just a moment too long. "Fear is the mind killer, as one of your ancient human philosophers once wrote." "Mr. Grant." Owen had no idea which philosopher that was, but he nodded anyway. "However," Professor Milt continued, "fear is also a survival mechanism. It keeps us alive in the presence of danger. It helps us identify threats. It teaches us which creatures to avoid." He moved to his desk where a large cloth covered something rectangular. "Today we will explore what fear looks like across different evolutionary backgrounds." A wheeled container rolled through the side door, guided by Professor Milt's assistant. The container was made of reinforced transparent material, and something inside it moved with enough force to make the entire box shake. Students leaned forward. Owen heard Dylan's breathing quicken from several rows ahead. Professor Milt pulled the cloth away from his desk, revealing a control panel. Inside this container is a juvenile ravager from the planet Talos 7. They are classified as apex predators in their native environment. This specimen is 6 months old, roughly the size of what you humans call a large dog, Mr. Grant. Owen stood up slightly to see into the container, a creature with obsidian black scales and luminescent orange eyes pressed against the transparent wall. Its mouth was covered with a metal muzzle and restraints held its forelegs immobile. Even restrained, it radiated a kind of coiled energy that made Owen think of thunderstorms. The Ravager species is responsible for the extinction of 2 sentient civilizations before containment. Protocols were established, Professor Milt said. Even juveniles possess enough strength and aggression to kill most species in this room. The classroom had gone completely silent. Now, Professor Milt's eyes gleamed in the lab's light. Let us discuss why everyone is looking at the only human in this room with such interest. Owen felt every eye turned toward him. He suddenly understood that this lesson was not just about the Ravager, it was about him. The Ravager cub made a sound like grinding metal mixed with a growl. Every student in the xenobiology lab reacted. Priya's crystalline body flashed bright red. Bastian shifted his massive weight backward. Dylan's fur turned completely white and his ears flattened against his skull. 3 students from an aquatic species that Owen could never properly pronounce retreated to the back wall, their mobility suits hissing with pressurized water. Only Owen leaned forward to get a better look. Professor Milt noticed. Of course he noticed. 8 eyes missed very little. Mr. Grant, you seem remarkably calm. The professor's legs carried him closer to Owen's table. Perhaps you do not understand the danger this creature represents. Owen shook his head. I understand. You said it killed 2 civilizations, but it's restrained and muzzled. We're safe, right? Safe is a relative term. Professor Milt gestured with 2 of his legs toward a holographic display that materialized above his desk. Let me provide context. Earth, your homeworld, is classified as a Class 7 death world. The hologram showed Earth rotating slowly, blue and green and beautiful. Owen had not realized how much he missed it until seeing it projected in alien light. Most species represented in this academy come from Class 2 or Class 3 worlds, Professor Milt continued. These classifications indicate mild climates, limited natural predators, and stable ecosystems. Earth contains more apex predators per unit of landmass than 92% of inhabited worlds in known space. The hologram shifted, showing creatures Owen recognized: lions, crocodiles, bears, sharks, eagles, wolves. Dylan made a sound that Owen's translator rendered as a whimper. Your species evolved not alongside one apex predator, but dozens, hundreds, if we count extinct species. Professor Milt's eyes fixed on Owen. You developed tool use and complex social structures as survival mechanisms because you lacked natural weapons. Your ancestors were prey, Mr. Grant, but they refused to accept that role. Owen felt his face grow warm. He had never thought about Earth that way. Growing up in Oregon, he had camped in forests where bears lived. He had swum in oceans where sharks hunted. His little sister had a collection of nature documentaries that she watched obsessively. None of it seemed strange until now, seeing it through alien eyes. Humans possess several traits common to predator species, Professor Milt said, returning to the container where the Ravager cub thrashed against its bonds. Forward-facing eyes for tracking movement and judging distance. Canine teeth designed for tearing flesh. A relatively short digestive system optimized for processing meat. We also eat plants, Owen said, his voice quieter than he intended. Lots of plants. My mom's a vegetarian. Yes, omnivorous by nature, but predatory by design. Professor Milt tapped the control panel, which brings us to today's practical lesson. I want to observe how different species react to an unrestrained predator. The classroom erupted. Students spoke over each other in a dozen languages that Owen's translator struggled to separate. Priya turned the color of a stop sign. Bastian actually stood up, his rocky body scraping against the ceiling. Professor, this violates safety protocols. Iris, one of the aquatic students, bubbled through her suit's speaker. We did not agree to this. The Ravager cannot actually harm you, Professor Milt said calmly. Invisible barriers will prevent it from making physical contact. However, your fear responses will be genuine, and that is what we are here to study. His eyes swept the room. Fear is data. Your reactions will help us understand the evolutionary psychology of prey species. He said prey species, while looking at everyone except Owen. But what about the human? Dylan asked, his voice cracking. What if it goes after him? Professor Milt's expression, if an arachnoid could be said to have expressions, seemed almost eager. An excellent question. We shall see. Before anyone could protest further, Professor Milt pressed a button. The muzzle on the Ravager cub fell away with a metallic click. The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth like curved glass daggers. Its tongue was purple and forked. It made that grinding growl sound again, louder this time. Several students grabbed their belongings, preparing to run despite the professor's assurances about barriers. Professor Milt pressed another button. The restraints holding the cub's legs disengaged. The Ravager cub launched itself from the container with explosive power. It cleared 3 meters in a single leap, landing in the center of the classroom floor. Its scales caught the light, making it seem like it was covered in moving shadows. Those orange eyes swept the room, and Owen could see the intelligence behind them. This was not a mindless monster. This was a thinking, calculating hunter. Someone screamed. Owen thought it might have been Dylan. The cub took a step toward Priya. She backed up so fast that her crystalline body cracked against the wall. The sound made the Ravager's head snap toward her, but then something else caught its attention. Its nostrils flared. The cub's head swiveled left and right, taking in scents. Students pressed themselves against walls, trying to become invisible. Bastian moved in front of 2 smaller students, using his bulk as a shield. The Ravager cub's gaze passed over every student in the room. Then it stopped, focusing on the back corner. On Owen. The creature's body language changed. Its tail, which had been lashing back and forth, went rigid. Its eyes locked onto the human like targeting lasers. It lowered its head slightly, and every muscle in its body tensed. Nobody move, Professor Milt said, but his voice carried an edge of uncertainty that had not been there before. The Ravager cub began walking toward Owen. Not running, not charging, walking with deliberate, measured steps. Each footfall clicked against the floor. The sound echoed in the silent classroom. Owen's hands gripped the edge of his table. His heart hammered in his chest, but something made him stay still. Some instinct he did not fully understand. The cub came closer. 3 meters away. 2 meters. 1. It stopped directly in front of Owen's table, close enough that he could see his reflection in its obsidian scales. Close enough to smell something. Like copper and ozone coming from its body. The Ravager cub stared at Owen. Owen stared back. Then the creature did something that made Professor Milt gasp in his clicking language. It sat down, tilted its head to one side, and its tail began to wag. Owen had grown up with dogs. 3 of them, to be exact. Bailey, who had died when Owen was 12. Scout, who still lived with his parents. And Murphy, the German shepherd mix that his sister had rescued from a shelter. Owen knew what a wagging tail meant, even on a creature with obsidian scales and teeth like broken glass. It's okay, Owen said softly. More to himself than the Ravager cub. The creature's ears, which Owen had not really noticed before, perked forward. They looked like fins made of the same dark scales, but they moved independently, focusing on Owen's voice. Owen slowly extended his hand, keeping it low, palm down. Knuckles forward. This was how his father had taught him to approach strange dogs at the park. Let them come to you. Let them decide you are safe, Mr. Grant. Do not move. Professor Milt's voice cracked through the translation collar, but Owen was already committed. The Ravager cub leaned forward, its snout stretching toward Owen's hand. He felt hot breath against his skin. The cub's nostrils flared, taking in his scent. Owen held perfectly still, barely breathing. The cub's tongue flicked out, tasting the air near Owen's fingers. Then it pressed its scaled head directly into Owen's palm. The texture surprised him. He expected something rough, like a lizard, but the scales were smooth and warm, almost soft. The cub pushed harder against his hand, and Owen took the hint. He began to scratch, finding the spots behind where the ear fins attached to the skull. The Ravager cub's eyes half closed. A sound came from deep in its chest, a rumbling purr that vibrated through Owen's hand into his arm. The creature shuffled closer, pressing against the table that separated them. This is impossible, Professor Milt whispered, but Owen barely heard him. The rest of the classroom remained frozen. Priya's color had shifted from red to a confused yellow. Dylan had his hands over his mouth, his eyes wide enough to show white around the dark centers. Bastian leaned forward slightly, his rocky features arranged in something that might have been curiosity. Owen moved his scratching to the other side of the cub's head. The purring intensified. Without warning, the Ravager cub rolled onto its side, exposing its belly. The scales there were lighter, more gray than black, and Owen could see the rise and fall of breathing. "You want belly rubs?" Owen said, and he could not help smiling. He reached down, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. His fingers touched the cub's stomach, and immediately one of its back legs started kicking involuntarily, just like Murphy did, just like every dog Owen had ever known. The absurdity of it made him laugh. A quiet laugh, but genuine. The sound made the cub's tail wag harder. It squirmed on the floor, all four legs moving now, completely vulnerable and apparently loving every second of attention. "Someone explain this," Bastian said, his voice like grinding stones. "I have watched many Earth-nature documentaries since humans joined the Academy. This behavior pattern matches your canine species. Because it's the same behavior," Owen said, still rubbing the cub's belly. "Submissive posture. Showing trust. This little guy is just a baby and he was scared in that container." "That little guy is a Ravager," Iris said from her corner. "They do not show trust. They do not act submissive. They kill." "Adults might," Owen agreed, "but this one is a juvenile. It's been restrained, muzzled, surrounded by strange beings in a strange place. Of course it was scared." He looked up at Professor Milt. "How long has he been in that container?" The professor's legs clicked against the floor as he moved closer. His data pad extended to record everything. The specimen was contained this morning for transport to the Academy. "Approximately 4 hours. 4 hours in a cage for a baby." Owen shook his head. "No wonder you were stressed, buddy." The Ravager cub rolled back onto its feet in one fluid motion. Before Owen could react, it jumped up, planting its front legs on his lap. It weighed more than he expected, solid muscle under those scales. The cub's face was level with Owen's now, close enough to count those glass dagger teeth. Then the creature began licking Owen's face. The tongue was rough and slightly sticky, like a cat's but bigger. Owen laughed again, turning his head away, but the cub was persistent. It wanted to give affection, and it was not taking no for an answer. Okay. Owen gently pushed the cub back. "That's enough kisses." The Ravager cub made a chirping sound, high-pitched and almost musical. It circled twice on the spot, then climbed fully into Owen's lap. For a creature the size of a large dog, it seemed remarkably determined to fit itself into a space too small for it. "You cannot be serious," Dylan said. "It is sitting on him." "It is purring," Priya added, her colors shifting through confused patterns. "I can hear it from here." The cub settled itself, tucking its tail around its body. It rested its head on Owen's chest, and within seconds its breathing slowed. The orange glow of its eyes dimmed. Its purring became a soft rumble. Owen looked down at the apex predator sleeping in his arms like an oversized puppy. "Is this not normal?" he asked the classroom. Professor Milt made a series of clicking sounds that the translator did not even attempt to interpret. He moved closer, his 8 eyes examining the scene from multiple angles. "In 30 years of xenobiology research, I have never witnessed a Ravager display comfort-seeking behavior toward any species, including their own." "Maybe nobody tried petting one before," Owen said. "Perhaps because most beings value their limbs." Bastian rumbled, but there was amusement in his tone. The class bell chimed, signaling the end of the session. Nobody moved. The Ravager cub continued sleeping, completely dead to the world. Owen tried to shift position, and the cub's eyes opened slightly. A low growl emerged, not threatening, but definitely annoyed. "I think I am stuck here," Owen said. Professor Milt began tapping rapidly on his data pad. "I must contact the faculty. This requires immediate analysis. The implications are extraordinary." "What implications?" Owen asked. "It's just a scared baby that needed comfort. That scared baby, as you call it, should have attempted to kill you." Professor Milt's eyes reflected the lab's blue light. "Instead, it bonded with you in a manner suggesting pack integration. Cross-species bonding of this nature is not just rare, Mr. Grant. It is functionally unknown." Dylan approached cautiously, his fur still pale. He looked at the sleeping Ravager, then at Owen, then back at the Ravager. "I have been afraid of humans since you arrived," he admitted quietly. "I watched videos about Earth. I saw your predators. I could not understand how your species survived." "We adapted," Owen said simply. "We made tools. We worked together. And apparently we made friends with things that wanted to eat us." The Ravager cub shifted in his sleep, making a small contented sound. "Or maybe," Owen continued, scratching gently behind the cub's ear fins, "we just learned that not everything dangerous wants to hurt you. Sometimes they just want someone to be kind to them." 20 minutes passed before the Ravager cub finally woke up on its own. It stretched in Owen's lap, extending each leg one at a time, then yawned wide enough to show every single one of those glass teeth. The purring had stopped, replaced by soft chirping sounds as the cub blinked itself awake. Owen's legs had gone numb 10 minutes ago, but he had not complained. Something about the weight of the creature felt right, like holding his sister's old cat that used to sleep on his chest during thunderstorms. "Okay, little guy," Owen said softly. "Time to get up." The cub looked at him with those orange eyes, tilted its head, then licked his chin once before hopping down. It sat at Owen's feet, tail still wagging, looking up at him expectantly. Professor Milt had spent the entire 20 minutes recording and muttering into his data pad. Now he approached carefully, keeping several meters between himself and the cub. "The faculty council requires your presence, Mr. Grant, immediately." "Am I in trouble?" Owen stood slowly, his legs tingling as blood flow returned. "That remains to be determined." Professor Milt gestured toward the door with two of his legs. "However, given that you have apparently domesticated one of the galaxy's most dangerous predator species in under an hour, I suspect they will want documentation." The walk through the academy corridors felt surreal. The Ravager cub followed at Owen's heels like Scout used to do. Students pressed themselves against walls, staring. Some recorded video on their devices. Others simply fled in the opposite direction. "This is going to be all over the Academy network," Dylan said, walking beside Owen despite his obvious nervousness. "You know that, right?" Owen shrugged. "Not much I can do about it now." "You could have not petted the murder lizard," Dylan suggested. "He is not a murder lizard. He is a baby." Owen glanced back at the cub, which chirped happily. "Aren't you, buddy?" The cub's tail wagged harder. The faculty council met in a chamber carved from the same glowing stone as the rest of the academy. But here the walls held shelves filled with artifacts from thousands of worlds. Dean Whistler, an elegant avian being with silver feathers and 4 wings, stood at the center of a semicircular table. Beside her sat Dr. Finn, whose species Owen could never quite identify beyond vaguely amphibious, and Security Chief Boulder, an insectoid whose carapace gleamed like polished bronze. Professor Milt's assistant had already sent the classroom recordings. A holographic display showed Owen's entire interaction with the Ravager cub from 4 different angles. "Mr. Grant." Dean Whistler's voice was melodic, almost song-like. "Please explain your actions." Owen stood in the center of the chamber. The Ravager cub sat beside him, occasionally looking up to check that Owen was still there. "I treated it like a scared animal, ma'am. That is all." "That is not all," Dr. Finn said, her throat sac inflating and deflating with each word. "What you did demonstrates an instinctive understanding of cross-species behavior that most trained xenobiologists spend decades developing." Security Chief Boulder leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes catching the light. "Humans are either very brave or very stupid. The data on your species has not yet determined which." "Maybe both," Owen admitted. "We had to be living on Earth." Dean Whistler tapped one wing against the table, creating a soft drumming sound. The holographic display shifted, showing not the classroom but a compilation of images from Earth. Dogs sleeping with humans, cats curled in laps, horses being ridden, falcons perched on gloved hands. Even images of humans hugging wolves at wildlife sanctuaries. "Your species has a documented history of forming bonds with creatures that should be competitors or predators," Dean Whistler said. "Wolves became dogs. Wild cats became companions. You domesticated horses, cattle, pigs, and dozens of other species. You even keep predators as pets for emotional support." "Well, yes," Owen said. "Animals are good for mental health. They provide companionship." The 3 faculty members exchanged looks that Owen could not quite interpret. "Most species do not think this way," Dr. Finn explained. "When we encounter dangerous fauna, we avoid them or eliminate them. We do not attempt to befriend them. Why not? Owen asked. Most animals are not actually trying to hurt you. They are just trying to survive. If you show them kindness, they usually respond to it. Usually, Security Chief Boulder said, his voice dry. And when they do not respond to kindness? Owen thought about the coyote that had bitten his father while they tried to free it from a fence. He thought about the hawk his sister had tried to help that had slashed her arm with its talons. Then you learn to be more careful, but you do not stop trying. Dean Whistler pulled up another file on the holographic display. We received a communication from Dr. Scale approximately 10 minutes ago. She is a Talesian researcher who has studied ravagers for 30 years. The juvenile in question is part of her long-term behavioral study. The hologram showed a reptilian being with blue-green scales and intelligent yellow eyes. Her voice played through the translation system. I have dedicated my career to understanding ravager psychology. In 3 decades, I have never seen the behavior witnessed today. Never. That juvenile would not allow even me to touch it without sedation. Yet it bonded with the human within minutes. Professor Milt had been standing quietly near the wall. Now he spoke up. I propose that Mr. Grant's actions reveal something fundamental about human evolutionary psychology. His species did not merely survive on a dangerous world. They thrived by turning danger into partnership. They are persistence hunters, Dr. Finn said. Humans would track prey for days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. But they also applied that same persistence to social bonding. They simply did not give up on connection, even with species that should have been threats. Owen shifted his weight. The Ravager cub pressed against his leg, leaning into him. The contact was comforting. Dr. Scale has made a request, Dean Whistler said, looking directly at Owen. She asks if you would be willing to participate in a supervised study. She wants to understand what you did and how it might apply to other creatures currently deemed too dangerous to handle. I just petted him, Owen said. I do not understand what the big deal is. The big deal, Mr. Grant, is that you may have demonstrated a human ability that could change how we approach xenobiology across the galaxy. Dean Whistler's feathers ruffled slightly. However, before we make any decisions about studies or programs, there is a more immediate concern. Security Chief Boulder's antennae twitched. We have a situation developing in the exotic fauna wing. Multiple containment breaches. Several dangerous specimens are loose in the habitat corridors. The floor beneath Owen's feet trembled slightly. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to wail. Among the escaped specimens, Security Chief Boulder continued, his voice grave, is an adult ravager, the parent of the juvenile currently bonded to Mr. Grant. The cub at Owen's feet suddenly went rigid, its ears flattened against its skull, and it made a high-pitched sound that Owen's translator did not even attempt to interpret. But Owen understood it anyway. It was a distress call, and somewhere in the academy something answered with a roar that shook the walls. The faculty chamber erupted into controlled chaos. Dean Whistler's wings spread wide as she accessed multiple screens simultaneously. Security Chief Boulder spoke rapidly into a communication device embedded in his carapace. Dr. Finn pulled up schematics of the Academy's habitat corridors, her throat sac pulsing with stress. Owen knelt beside the Ravager cub, which was now crying. That was the only word for the sound it made. Not growling or snarling, but a keening wail that spoke of fear and need. The cub pressed into Owen's legs, trembling. Hey, it's okay, Owen said, running his hand along the cub's scaled back. We will figure this out. Mr. Grant, you need to evacuate to a secure location, Security Chief Boulder said without looking away from his screens. The adult Ravager is moving through Section 7. If it reaches this wing, it is looking for him. Owen kept his voice steady despite his racing heart. The cub. It is looking for its baby. Professor Milt moved closer, his 8 eyes focusing on the trembling juvenile. Adult Ravagers are extremely protective of their offspring. If it believes the cub is threatened, it will eliminate any perceived danger. Then we need to show it the cub is safe, Owen said. Absolutely not. Dean Whistler's voice cut through the room like a blade. Mr. Grant, I understand your instinct is to help, but an adult Ravager is not a frightened juvenile. It weighs over 300 kilograms and can bite through reinforced steel. Another roar echoed through the walls, closer this time. The cub's crying intensified. Owen felt the creature's heartbeat racing through its body, fast and terrified. My security teams are pinned down by other escaped specimens, Security Chief Boulder reported. Razorwing hunters have created a perimeter in the main corridor. Automated defenses are offline in sections 6 through 9. The Ravager will reach this wing in approximately 4 minutes. Owen stood up. The cub immediately pressed against his legs, nearly tripping him. I can get to the habitat wing. I can reach the cub's enclosure before the adult gets here. That is suicide, Dr. Finn said flatly. No, it is not. Owen picked up the cub, which curled against his chest immediately. This little guy trusts me. If I can get him to where the adult can see him safe and unharmed, maybe it will calm down. Maybe is not a tactical assessment, Security Chief Boulder said. It is the best option we have. Owen looked at each faculty member in turn. That adult is going to tear through every barrier until it finds its baby. People are going to get hurt. The academy could be damaged. Or I can take 10 minutes and try to fix this peacefully. Dean Whistler's feathers smoothed flat against her body. A sign Owen had learned meant deep thought. Professor Milt, your assessment? The arachnoid scholar moved closer to Owen, studying him with all 8 eyes. Human beings are pack animals. They form protective bonds that override self-preservation instincts. Mr. Grant has bonded with this juvenile. He will attempt to reach the adult regardless of our permission. That is not an answer, Dean Whistler said. It is the only answer that matters. Professor Milt turned to Owen. You will need a personal shield generator and a communication device. If the situation becomes untenable, you must retreat immediately. Security Chief Boulder clicked his mandibles together in what might have been resignation. I will provide equipment and monitor your progress. But Mr. Grant, if that adult charges you, shields will buy you perhaps 3 seconds. Do you understand? Owen nodded. The cub in his arms chirped softly, nuzzling against his shoulder. 2 minutes later, Owen stood at the entrance to the habitat corridors. He wore a belt with a shield generator that Dr. Finn promised would protect him from most impacts. A small communication bud sat in his ear, connecting him to Security Chief Boulder's command center. The Ravager cub clung to him like a backpack, its front legs wrapped around his shoulders. Corridors clear for the next 30 meters. Security Chief Boulder's voice crackled in his ear. Razorwing hunters are in Section 8, parallel to your route. Move quickly but quietly. Owen started walking. The corridor's blue glow seemed dimmer here, as if even the living stone sensed danger. Claw marks gouged the walls. A mobility suit lay abandoned on the floor, its occupant having fled. Owen stepped over it carefully. The cub's breathing was warm against his neck. It made soft chirping sounds, almost like it was talking to itself, or maybe to him. You are doing fine, Owen whispered. We are going to find your parent. A shriek echoed from somewhere to his left. One of the Razorwing hunters, probably. Owen forced himself to keep walking at a steady pace. Running would trigger chase instincts. He had learned that from wildlife documentaries. Turn right at the next junction, Security Chief Boulder said. Habitat wing is 40 meters ahead, Owen turned. The corridor here showed more damage. Deep gouges in the walls as if something massive had dragged its claws along the stone. A door hung off its hinges. Owen saw what looked like scales embedded in the wall, blue and iridescent. Something else had been through here, not the Ravager. The cub suddenly went still on his back. Its purring stopped. Owen felt its body tense. What is wrong? He whispered. Then he smelled it. That copper and ozone scent, but stronger. Much stronger. Mr. Grant, stop moving. Security Chief Boulder's voice was urgent. The adult Ravager is in your corridor. 20 meters ahead. Owen's heart hammered. He could not see it yet. The corridor curved and the dim light created shadows that moved. But he heard breathing. Deep, rumbling breaths that sounded like a storm building. The cub on his back made a high-pitched call. Not crying this time, calling. An answering roar shook the walls. Then it appeared around the curve of the corridor. The adult Ravager was massive. Its head reached the ceiling. Its body filled the corridor from wall to wall, obsidian scales catching what little light remained. Those orange eyes burned like dying stars, and when it opened its mouth, Owen saw teeth the length of his forearm. Run, Security Chief Boulder said. Mr. Grant, run now. But Owen stayed perfectly still. The cub climbed from his back to his front, pressing against his chest. It called out again, a desperate sound. The adult Ravager stalked forward. Each step made the floor tremble. It moved like a living shadow, muscles rippling under those scales. Murder made flesh. Death on 4 legs. Owen slowly, carefully began to kneel. His knees hit the floor. The cub squirmed in his arms, wanting to go to its parent. Easy, Owen said, as much to himself as to the creatures. Easy now. The adult ravager stopped 3 meters away. This close, Owen could count the scars on its snout. This was not some tame animal from a zoo. This was a survivor, a fighter, an apex predator that had earned its place at the top of the food chain. It lowered its massive head, bringing those jaws level with Owen's face. He could feel heat radiating from its body, could smell old blood on its breath. The cub chirped and squirmed harder. Owen, moving slowly enough that time seemed to stop, loosened his grip. The cub scrambled free and ran to its parent. It pressed against the adult's leg, making happy chirping sounds, tail wagging frantically. The adult ravager's eyes shifted from the cub to Owen. It took one step forward, then another. Owen held his breath, watching his death approach. Then the adult ravager lowered its head and pressed its snout into Owen's extended hand. The adult ravager's scales were rougher than the cub's, marked with scars and age. Owen felt the creature's breath wash over his hand, hot and smelling of things he did not want to identify. His fingers shook, but he kept them steady enough to scratch behind the ridge where skull met neck. The adult's eyes closed halfway. A rumbling sound emerged from deep in its chest, lower and more powerful than the cub's purring, but unmistakably the same thing. The cub bounced excitedly at its parent's feet, chirping and rubbing against the massive legs. Mr. Grant, Security Chief Boulder's voice was barely a whisper in his ear, as if speaking too loud might break whatever spell had been cast. I am watching this on 3 different camera feeds, and I still do not believe it. Owen did not respond. He was too focused on the adult ravager, which had begun to lean into his touch the same way the cub had. This close, he could see the intelligence in those orange eyes. Not human intelligence, but awareness. Understanding. The adult ravager turned its head, gently nudging the cub with its snout. The juvenile chirped once more, then trotted down the corridor in the direction Owen had come from. The adult watched it go, then looked back at Owen. I think it wants me to follow, Owen said quietly. The cub is heading toward the habitat wing entrance, Security Chief Boulder confirmed. The adult is positioning itself between you and potential threats. Mr. Grant, I believe it is guarding you. Owen stood slowly. The adult ravager watched his every movement but made no aggressive gestures. When Owen started walking in the direction the cub had gone, the adult fell into step beside him. Not behind, not in front. Beside him, like a partner. They passed through corridors that had been scenes of panic only minutes before. The razorwing hunters that Security Chief Boulder had mentioned spotted them from a side passage. One began to dive, wings spread, talons extended. The adult ravager made a sound like avalanche and earthquake combined. The razorwing hunter reversed direction so fast it nearly crashed into the wall, fleeing back the way it had come. Other escaped specimens are retreating, Security Chief Boulder reported. They sense the apex predator. You have just become the most protected human in the galaxy, Mr. Grant. The cub waited at a blast door that led to the habitat wing. When it saw Owen and its parent approaching, it began bouncing again, that wagging tail a blur of motion. Owen reached the door and placed his hand on the access panel. It scanned his academy identification and opened with a hiss of pressurized air. The habitat wing was designed to house creatures in environments matching their homeworlds. Through transparent walls, Owen saw forests and oceans and deserts, all contained within carefully controlled ecosystems. The Ravager enclosure was at the end of the main corridor, marked with hazard symbols in 6 different languages. Dr. Scale stood outside the enclosure, her blue-green scales pale with stress. When she saw Owen walking toward her flanked by both Ravagers, she made a sound that Owen's translator rendered as profound shock. "How?" she asked simply. "I just talked to them," Owen said. The cub ran ahead, diving through the open door of its enclosure. It grabbed what looked like a well-chewed toy and brought it back to Owen, dropping it at his feet. Its tail wagged expectantly. Owen picked up the toy, some kind of rubber ball studded with raised bumps. He threw it back into the enclosure. The cub raced after it with obvious joy. The adult Ravager watched this for a moment, then looked at Owen. Its expression, if a Ravager could be said to have expressions, seemed almost amused. It walked to the enclosure entrance and paused, turning back. Owen understood. "You are welcome. Take care of your kid." The adult Ravager made a low, gentle sound. Then it entered the enclosure. The cub immediately tackled its parent's leg, and the two began what could only be described as playing. Wrestling and rolling, the massive adult careful not to hurt its offspring. Dr. Scale stood frozen, her data pad hanging forgotten in her hands. 30 years, she said. 30 years of research. And a human student accomplishes in 20 minutes what I could not do in 3 decades. It is not your fault, Owen said. You did not grow up on Earth. Dean Whistler's voice came through the communication bud. Mr. Grant, please return to the faculty wing. We have much to discuss. The walk back felt longer than the journey there. Students lined the corridors, held back by security barriers but watching with devices recording everything. Owen heard whispers in a dozen languages, most of which his translator could only partially interpret. Some words came through clearly, though. Human, Deathworlder, Predator friend. Dylan met him halfway, his fur slowly returning to its normal brown color. The whole academy knows. The video's everywhere. You are trending on 6 different planetary networks. I just helped a lost baby find its parent, Owen said. You bonded with the galaxy's most dangerous predator species twice. Dylan walked beside him, keeping pace. Do you understand what this means? Humans are not just survivors from a dangerous world. You are mediators, bridges between species. Owen had not thought about it that way. He had simply done what felt right. The faculty council chamber was more crowded when he returned. Professor Milt was presenting data on holographic displays. Dr. Finn was in heated discussion with several other researchers. Security Chief Boulder monitored feeds from across the academy, ensuring all escaped specimens had been contained. Dean Whistler saw Owen enter and held up one wing for silence. The room quieted. Mr. Grant, the faculty has reached a decision. Dr. Scale has formally requested your assistance with her research, and we believe this serves both her work and your education. You will be assigned as a student assistant in the exotic fauna wing, working with creatures previously deemed too dangerous for direct contact. Owen blinked. I am not even sure what I did. That is precisely what we need to understand. Dean Whistler's feathers caught the light, creating patterns of silver and blue. Your species evolved on a world that should have killed you. Instead, you learned to communicate with that danger, to find common ground with creatures that had every reason to destroy you. This is not weakness, Mr. Grant, this is wisdom. Professor Milt approached, his 8 eyes gleaming with academic excitement. I am preparing a paper on today's events. With your permission, I would like to title it, The Human Empathy Paradox, Cross-Species Bonding as an Evolutionary Advantage. Sure, Owen said, still processing everything. The meeting continued for another hour. Protocols were established. Safety measures were discussed. Owen would work with Dr. Scale 3 days per week, studying creatures that had resisted conventional handling methods. Other human students at the academy would be invited to participate, testing whether Owen's ability was individual or species-wide. Finally, Dean Whistler dismissed the council. Students returned to dormitories. Faculty members dispersed to their quarters. Owen walked back to his room with Dylan, exhaustion settling into his bones. You are going to be famous, Dylan said, tapping through his data pad. The Galactic News Network wants an interview. So does Earth's Interstellar Relations Committee, and apparently, 3 different research institutions have offered you full scholarships. Owen stopped at his door. Through the window, the 3 suns were rising, painting the alien sky in colors Earth never saw, purple and gold and green, beautiful and strange. I just want to sleep, he said. But before he could enter his room, his communication device chimed, a message from his sister who must have seen the videos. Her text made him smile. You petted an alien murder lizard. Mom says she is not surprised. Dad wants to know if it was friendly. I am telling everyone my brother is famous. Also, Murphy misses you. He has been sleeping on your bed. Owen responded with a simple message. Tell Murphy I miss him too. And that I met a new friend who reminds me of him. Miss you all. He entered his room, kicked off his shoes, and collapsed onto his bed. Through the window, he could see the distant shape of the exotic fauna wing. Somewhere in there, a Ravager cub was probably curled up with its parent, both of them safe and content. Owen closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new studies, new creatures to understand. But tonight he allowed himself to feel something he had not felt since arriving at the academy. He felt like he belonged. Because sometimes, the most human thing you can do is look at something dangerous, something feared, something misunderstood, and offer it kindness anyway. Not because it is easy or safe, but because it is right. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needed a little more of that.